Hello and welcome to the panel, where we take a look at graphic novels and talk about their story, art, and everything in between. Death has been fired. With humanity on the verge of discovering immortality, Death's job is no longer needed, and she's sent down to Earth as an immortal. What's a girl got to do to get her job back? Sit back and get ready to find out on this episode of the panel. Joining me today, we have from PREVIEWSworld, we have consumer marketing digital content editor Troy Jeffrey Allen.
Hey, I don't have a quote this week, so I'm just going to say hi.
Just keeping it simple.
Keeping it simple.
All right, and we also have the ever amazing Duchess of Free Comic Book Day, Ashton Greenwood.
Hey, howdy, hey. I never have a quote.
Well, you have like a signature phrase.
So right, yeah, that's your signature phrase. All right.
And last but not least, our infamous yet usually behind the scenes producer, Johny Rose.
Infamous.
He is infamous.
He's also muted. Okay, there he is.
No, no.
How's everyone doing?
Cool. Doing all right.
Yeah.
Great.
Really
New Year
excited
starting
to talk
off
about
okay.
this. It's interesting.
Oh. Not sure how to feel about that.
Okay might be a little strong, but it is interesting.
Oh,
We all have been getting a lot of snow, right?
Yeah, we have. Yeah. I hate snow, so.
It is 70 degrees today, and it
Right.
snowed 6 inches
What?
last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like 30 degrees 2 days ago, and now it's 70.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
Okay,
like Maryland weather right now is like Mother Nature's calling out lottery numbers, like 30, 75, 2.
wow, that's crazy. Well, I would definitely like the 70 right now. It's a little bit cold, but we haven't gotten any snow, so sorry, y'all.
Mhm.
Well, you just jinxed yourself. Get ready.
All right, get ready.
Uh-oh.
Can we trade? Because that was not fun.
Oh,
What?
I'm
That
sorry.
was delightful.
I'm not a fan of snow. Can't do it.
Well, something that you could do while you are snowed in is read, and
Yes.
what we've all been doing is reading LAILA STARR. So in LAILA STARR, Death has been reincarnated into a human body in Mumbai after her job becomes redundant. In order to save her job, Death embarks on a journey of life and death in order to prevent humanity from discovering the key to immortality. So kind of a heavy theme that we've got going on in this book this month.
Mhm.
And then I was also thinking back on the fact that there have been like a lot of layoffs too, like lately. So I'm like, man, what's a girl? What does someone have to do to get their job back? In all honesty. So, what was everyone's thoughts going into this graphic novel?
I'm
What
going
you
first. Okay, surprise. I was incredibly excited to read this, actually. I had picked it last year when the graphic novel, when the trade came out on PREVIEWSworld Weekly as something I wanted to read and get my hands on. I never got the chance to do it. So when Troy was like, we're reading this, I was like, yes, like I have to be on this episode of the panel. I loved this book. Like, yes, it was a heavy read, but I think it did a really great job of capturing the range of emotions that come with being human, coming to terms with those things, experiencing life and living and death and the death of your loved ones around you. And when I say it captured that full range of emotions, I mean, it captured it in its storytelling. And I also felt like it pushed those emotions onto you as the reader. Like, I laughed at this book. I gasped at this book. I cried at the ending of this book. Like, I felt every single thing that the characters in this book felt. And so the creators did a really great job of putting that on the page and having you feel it in your own soul.
Wow, that was an in-depth, really good synopsis.
That was
there.
an impassioned, is what that was. Yes.
What about you, Troy?
I just want to say, for a book about death, this book is delightful in a lot of interesting ways. I read this book, I want to say, as it came out, and I don't even know what prompted me to do that. I think I was like, let me give this Ram V guy a chance, right? And I read it and I was like, I instantly got it. I was really excited for both of you to read this book, because I know sometimes I push superhero stuff on you guys on the show, and I was like, I feel like everyone's going to get something great out of this. So yeah, I was really excited, and I'm glad that I got to reread this again, because yeah, the second time around I was like, yeah, this book is actually very unique and very special.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And to your point, Troy, about it even though it's a book about death, like it's actually more so a book about life than anything, which I thought was interesting, because it's very much framed like it's going to be about death. It's going to be about the personification of death and her carrying out that act in order to keep herself in business, essentially. And it turns out to not be about death really in any form. And so death in all of its forms. So it was a really abstract take on that, which I appreciated.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. It's so deep, and there's so many nuances to it. So actually, let's go ahead and start deep diving into the story. So Ram V is an Eisner-nominated award-winning author and creator of comics and graphic novels such as Gravity Falls, These Savage Shores, The Many Deaths of LAILA STARR, and the Eisner-winning Blue and Green. Since publishing his first book in 2016, Ram's work has gone on to garner critical and popular success, winning multiple awards. Apart from creating original work, Ram has also written for iconic characters and titles such as Detective Comics, Swamp Thing, Justice League Dark, Catwoman, Venom, Carnage at DC, and Marvel. I mean, so much. So he's got a great lineage that he's coming from, but this is something I feel that's like absolutely unique. So let's go ahead and just start deep diving into this. Was there a character that you were really just got your attention and you were just focused on them? Was it LAILA? Was it, who was it? We'll go with Troy.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think LAILA actually like really immediately grabs you, just in terms of who is this person, right? And it kind of, not to spoil anything, but it kind of starts with an apparent suicide, we'll say.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's kind of, it's a little murky about whether or not at first. But like, yeah, it's just sort of like you want to know more about this person, how it relates to death herself, right? So yeah, I would definitely say that. I also actually want to point out real quick, I had a moment right before we were talking where I was like, oh God, wait a minute, is it Rom 5 or is it Rom V? Like, because I've never actually heard anyone say his name out loud before, so I'm assuming it's Rom V. I'm just gonna let that go. But I had a moment of panic for a second.
Well, now you're giving me a moment of panic.
Sorry.
Somebody YouTube it, Johnny.
Hopefully, if I'm wrong, someone calls me out in the chat. So yeah, I had kind of the same feeling about her. I was like, who is this person? Like, I want that backstory of like why this person in particular that they decided to, reincarnate death into. So yeah, because there's like the LAILA that was before, and then the LAILA that's afterwards, right?
Afterwards, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What about you, Ashton?
Yeah, I mean, definitely LAILA, which I think that's kind of the point, is that you're following her. I do think it's interesting that she had kind of like a companion each of the chapters that helped guide her. And I thought it was interesting that actually one of the chapters, her companion was a cigarette, just because I thought it did a really good job of underscoring how powerful she is, even in her human form, right? Like the cigarette says at one point, I shared a kiss with death and now I have this knowledge from her. Which, like, if the concept is that she goes down to be immortal, like, she's not entirely immortal. And I think, Darius points that out to her at one point, and I think that is an interesting factor in the tug of war she has with herself, the internal tug of war. And then speaking of Darius, one other thing I wanted to point out, because I thought it was really, really interesting, incredibly nuanced, is all of the ways that LAILA STARR dies. throughout the book, hence the many deaths. Some of them are super common, like the car accident and the drowning, like ways that people frequently die. And then some of them are kind of random, like the building fire and the temple breaking down. But all of them happen more or less because she's not paying attention to what's going on around her. She's so focused on her sole job of finding Darius that she doesn't see the things that are in front of her. And I think it's interesting that that would ultimately be the same thing that leads Darius to not put out the secret to immortality, that they would actually be kindred spirits in a way.
Right. Yeah. Yes, it's V.
Okay. Bless.
Oh, me, I think you're muted. Who muted V? Who muted?
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I was just trying to make sure you didn't get all the other outside noises. But yeah, no, we got it right.
You never quite know with us.
I know, right? Yeah, I love that she had the companions. I also loved, kind of as like a side character was Life, and their kind of interplay, and very much like, because I feel like it's appropriate that they have this relationship, whether it's like friends with benefits kind of thing, or it's like just friends. We don't know necessarily, but the whole like, there is no me without you is just such like a romance movie kind of like. But I love that because it's true. There really is this connectivity between the two of them, and that he's there for her, even though, like, technically her job's gonna be gone. Like,
right. Yeah.
He's just like, I know, sorry, but let me help you through this. But yeah, I loved their interview.
Yeah, and I think he was a really important like narrative device in a way for her to help like be a sounding board, I guess, and talk through some of those things. Like, when you first meet the God of Life, her whole thing is like, I couldn't kill him because he's a baby. And he sort of talks her through, why that's a fair decision to make, and, how she should be compassionate for herself. But, he's not a baby anymore because we keep having these time jumps. And so every time you see him after the time jump, he kind of is almost like a therapeutic source for her, which I thought was interesting, that even this like concept or this incarnation of an idea still needs a partner. Like, we all need a partner. We all need a companion.
Yes, the yin and yang, like the polar opposites, that sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way of seeing that. So what was there like one moment that like really got to your heartstrings? Because there are so many moments that are so poignant in the story. Was there one that just made you go like, wow, this is, I mean, mine was the whole life and death one, right? The whole like me without you. That was my moment of like, wow, this is deep. This is a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be. Let's pick on Ashton first.
So mine, I actually have this one ready. Like, I literally tabbed it. I don't think you can say it, but I put a tab in my books. I'm like, I need to make sure I mention this. And it comes fairly close to the end when Darius is like the oldest we see him, and the girl takes the dog to him, and he's kind of like doctoring up this dog with the broken leg to make sure it lives. And the quote says, "But life is worthy and beautiful, even if it is not always pretty." And I thought that just one sentence summed up this entire book, and also kind of the entire human experience of like, it's what a blessing. And I know that comes from a place of privilege, but to be able to like experience everything that is life, to love, receive love, to have chosen family and birth family, and experience like beautiful things and the heartbreak and the ups and the downs and everything that is life. It's not always, pretty. It's not, but it's always beautiful, and you always walk away with something. And I thought that one sentence captured everything this book was trying to tell us.
Yeah, I think Darius, definitely. I like, you kind of spend the book anticipating their conversation, like, their conversation together and where that's going to go. And it actually cemented the slightly sci-fi angle of the story for me, right? Which is that he's invented a cure for death, right? And like this idea that's kind of presented early on, but it, like the whole time I'm reading, I'm like, well, how did he do that? What is that? Like, you know what I mean? Like the superhero reader in my brain is like, well, what is that? How does that work? And the explanation we get is brief but satisfying. It also kind of doesn't matter in a lot of ways, because that's not really the plot point. You know, it's not really what this story is about. Also found myself really liking was it Wei, the guy who's on the at the doorstep every day and is like opening the door and sweeping and everything. Like I thought that was a fun character. I found that character very fascinating, the methodical nature of that character.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that's really unique about this is the fact that it's set in Mumbai, which leads us into, you know, the Hindu deities, which for me, I will admit, like I read this and I was like, oh man, I really did not keep up with like, you know, world religion in junior high and high school. And I was like trying to go back and I was really impressed with the fact that like the way that they portrayed the Hindu gods in the comic, you know, was kind of accurate to not only what they would look like, but kind of I feel like what they would be like, personality wise.
Right.
What were your thoughts on I guess it would be Vishnu and oh gosh, what were the other ones? I had them pulled up, and Brahma I think was the creator with the three heads. What were your thoughts on this being, you know, with Hindu deities? And
I mean, I love the modernization of some of these characters, right? I mean, just like from the jump, like we kind of get to see them as like part of this larger corporate entity, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was really fascinating that like you kind of have to run I don't know if you want to call it not the afterlife, but you know, the other world has to run like a business in a lot of ways, right? And that's how we end up with Death being laid off in the first place. I found that really cool and really fascinating and very unique in a lot of ways. Just sort of like, oh, okay, this is the direction we're going to go. So she is literally getting laid off.
Like she literally has like her banker's box of personal life.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like she has to take it with her out of the office. I thought that was really cool and really fascinating. And like the way that it's presented is also like kind of immediate. So you just kind of accept it that it's just part of this story and part of this world, and it just takes you for the ride. I thought that was really neat.
Agreed. I liked that it was, you know, true to its source material, true to those deities, but like Troy said, presented in a way that felt very digestible if that wasn't information you were super familiar with, and you were able to just run away with it. I thought it was an interesting nod, and Troy kind of touched on this as well, about like having the like super corporate feeling kind of coexist with religion, and what it might look like to have like secularism or like modernism coexist with religion. I thought that was an interesting kind of nod there, a nuanced commentary on that.
Yeah, I really love that. One of the things that I want to know though is I want to know what taxes look like. Because did they say that there was a god of taxes?
They did, yes.
And I was like, oh God, what does that one look like?
Right. Yeah. And I love that, like, you know, yes, there is a god of death and a god of taxes. Like, I absolutely love that. I thought that was great.
Johny said nothing sure in life but death and taxes.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Honestly.
Right.
Oh, so true. Now, going into the characters, you got to talk about how they're drawn. And so this leads us going into the art, which is, I think, goes hand in hand with the story on this one. So let's go ahead and start adding art to this conversation. Felipe Andrade is a Portuguese multidisciplinary artist working professionally in visual art since 2008. Felipe has coordinated with Marvel since 2009 with his first comic book on Iron Man Titanium. And since then, he's drawn characters such as X-23, Captain America, Black Widow, Wolverine. I mean, you name the Marvel character, he's done it. So coming from, again, this great background in, you know, the big two. And then it's completely its own thing, which I love and am fascinated by. So let's deep dive into the art. Let's go with, who am I going to pick on? Troy, since you have the colorful background.
The colorful background. There you go.
Which I feel is appropriate.
Yeah. Well, actually, so clearly mood is my thing, right? And as the kids say, this art is a mood, right? I've been thinking a lot about artists who even though it's a medium of still images, their art has movement to it. And Felipe is definitely in that category. When an artist can convey what it's like to just be able to have a character that's a still image move through a panel. That's like a new level of artistry that I don't think we appreciate enough in comics. It's a skill in itself, and a lot of, I won't say a lot of times, but there are a lot of comics out there that are like the art looks pretty, but it's stiff or it feels posed. This feels like it's constantly moving. It actually reminded me of I don't know if you guys remember this anime called is it Tekken Cricket that came out like a few years. It was like one of those anime that that all the critics loved early on, and it was like one of the first animes here in America type of things. It was like in the early 2000s. It reminds me of that a lot. And I'm butchering the name, but I think it's Tekken Cricket. Yeah, and so it gave me those vibes, and Felipe is just a great artist. It has an energy to it that is not always easy to find.
Yeah, definitely the mood. I feel like it was kind of like mood lighting, right? It was like based on kind of what the scene was. You got like these really rich colors, and it's color combinations you don't see that often in comics, really.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that made it kind of unique is this like very modern, almost like neon lights kind of like aspect to it. What about you, Ashton? What did you think?
Yeah, I definitely thought you kind of just touched on it. One of the first things I noticed was how Felipe was able to kind of capture the fantastical and the mundane, which I thought was interesting because it's set in Mumbai, and Johny showed that very first panel. Like, it does a really good job of like highlighting the skyscrapers, and that stuff in the background's the first thing that draws your eye. And then everything that's in the foreground is somehow not the thing you're looking at. It's also the most mundane thing, which is like traffic and smaller buildings. And kind of immediately set the tone of like the thing that's going to be important here is the things that are man-made, and therefore like the man-made immortality. And that's kind of a theme throughout. And Troy, you mentioned like the movement. One like a set of panels I really wanted to point out was the third time she meets Darius when he's older, when he's 36, and they kind of like get to have like that conversation about what she wants from him. And she tells him that he's the god of death, and he cracks the glass in his hand and then like gets off and grabs her. Like, all those panels just hit so fast. You really like you felt his emotion. You felt how angry he was. And yeah, just to be able to capture all of that in a still image is so impressive.
For some reason, and I don't know why it like reminded me of it, but remember in The Last Unicorn when the older lady, she like, I forget what her name was. And she goes up to the unicorn and she's like, why are you coming to me now? Like, how come you didn't come to me when I was younger and beautiful? And now I get to see this unicorn, but I'm old. And it's kind of like this thing where it's like, how dare you come back by when I'm like old and you've been here my whole life and doing this. And it was like that same powerful reaction of like, how dare you?
Right. Why wait till now?
Yeah.
Right. Which is really interesting too. Like, and I mean, this is more of a writing thing than an art thing, but like, even for being the like god of death, like she still didn't know what to say to him. She still had to like hype herself up and was like still anxious about it, which like at that point in time would make her more human than God, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I think she like started developing like a humanity, right? I think that was like this idea of like what is being human, and it is like this mess of we are a mess.
Co-signed.
Well, there's and this is maybe more in the category of the story, but like there's a great bit like early on, right when she's taking her stuff out of the office, and she's kind of like, I've got to be human. I'm gonna go down there and I'm gonna grow old and have aches and pains, and I trust people I shouldn't trust and have my heart broken. And it was just sort of like, okay, this, it was just like, oh wow, like she understands our plight, you know what I mean? Even
Yeah.
though she's above it all, you know? And for that reason, she doesn't want to be human, you know? And I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was a really interesting character moment that kind of begins the path of her learning more about us outside of what she has clearly already known over the course of eternity, but she still hasn't discovered everything because she hasn't had to feel it herself, you know?
Yeah, which I think makes that particular journey even more powerful, because she starts with a baseline knowledge of how bad it can be. And like you said, a lot of those things she mentions are really like the downsides of being human.
Right.
It's the harder elements. And so she's going into it with like, being human sucks. Like, here's all the worst things about it. Da, da, da. And as she lives and meets people and has all these experiences, she kind of starts to like see the bright side of things, the good side of being human, and all of the great things you can experience, and all the ways people touch you, and all of the memories they leave with you.
Now
Absolutely.
we're gonna go into like spoiler territory real fast. So I'm sorry, I kind of want to talk about the ending here, because it was something that like I wasn't like, I don't know, I didn't really know where it was gonna go, because Darius had so many options of like what could happen, right? What were your feelings on the ending and the choice that Darius made? How do you feel about that? Let's go. Well, Troy.
Oh God! Don't do me first. Go to Ashton first.
I feel like I should have said this earlier, which is I finished reading this book last week, which means I've had a whole week to think about it, which means I have a lot of thoughts. So the ending, my experience with the ending was actually two parts, because the first one was, okay, so I guess for context, like he discovers immortality, the secret to immortality, and then he realizes in doing that, he completely alienates his son and figures like the output wasn't worth the input, so he's not going to do anything with it. And so then he gives it to LAILA to do something with it, and I'm like, when he does that, I had like a gasp, because I'm like, where is this going to go? And then she like sets it adrift, whatever, and makes that decision. But I think the really important thing is not that she made the decision we thought or we assumed she was going to make. It's the reason why she made it, which is what we just talked about. She had that journey to understanding, how important it is to have all of those aspects of life, and to have those connections, and to have those memories, and the good and the bad and all of that. And I think Darius helped her get there. And I think even though he kind of was the counterpart, and to some extent her nemesis, if you will, the fact that he ends up being the most critical person to get her to understand the human experience felt very satisfying.
Yeah, I love how she developed into like that selfishness kind of disappeared, right? Because it was like the selfishness in the beginning as a god, like I want to be a god, I want my job back, like screw this kid. And like over the years, this development until the very end where it's like, here, you got what you wanted. So
then, by the time she got what she wanted, though, she didn't even really want it
anymore, right? And in a weird way, it's like she inspired him to not pursue this thing, you know what I mean? And like, even though like I think it was like the second interaction with them, I think it is, she actually inspires him to pursue this cure, but by the end of it, he's just sort of like, there's a line about like the stories we tell are like is the proof of life or something like that at the very end. And I love that, because I think that in itself is the story that we're reading. It's also like really cool that I feel like Ramvi is like, some writers try to manipulate your feelings, which I think is, that's part of the game too, of like, telling stories. Like you got to be a little manipulative. But this book is striking nerves. Like, like it's not trying to make you feel a way. It just is. And by the end of it, like, it's a thing of beauty. It's just really impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of what you take away from it at the end, as well. It's kind of like her decision and then your decision on what this means to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was one I like walked away and was like, this is deep. Like this is like it comes off and it starts off as like this, you know, kind of simple story about corporate gods, and it's kind of fun, and then you realize that like it's a deep message, but told in a way that is kind of easy to understand, I guess, and digest.
Yeah.
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 Like it's a breezy read. Like, I mean, again, like despite the heft of the subject matter, like it's something that you can kind of like, you kind of just get through it. Like you just breeze through it, because it's just kind of like, it's just kind of sweeping you along. And I think that's also a very unique quality in the storytelling. Like it just kind of takes you with it.
Yeah, I'm also here for like one complete story. You know, like I love long run comics, but at the same time, like I love when you get like this one perfect book, right? This one perfect comic. And I think that's really kind of what it is when you think about it all over the whole entire like art and the story. So, you know, as we're getting towards the end of the show, what are your thoughts now that you've read the book, you've discussed it with us? What are your overall thoughts about The Many Deaths of LAILA STARR? And look at me forgetting that intro. Really amazing intros. Ahead, and we will start with Ashton. What is your overall? Give us an overall review.
My overall review. Okay. Well, first of all, my overall review is please read this. Like, I know we've talked in great detail here and we've discussed the ending, and maybe you feel like you've gotten a good look at the book. And if you have, that's great. But I would urge you to still read it, because it is so nuanced in what it's trying to tell us about the human experience that even we can't do it justice on this show. So you should definitely read it. And one of the other things is, you know, this might be super corny, but, you know, there's the Keanu Reeves quote when he was on Colbert. Colbert asked him, like, what happens when we die? And his response was, I don't know, but I know the people who love us will miss us very much. And I thought about that a lot when I was reading this, because that was really how I felt with this book, right? Like I said, it's not about death. It's about life. It's about the things you leave behind, the people you impact, the people who have impacted you, and being grateful for those experiences and understanding that they are completely and totally unique to the human condition. And there's something beautiful in that. I feel like that was like way too deep, but that's totally how I felt about this.
No, yeah, no, that's it. That's it right there. Absolutely.
Totally
also, I think it's funny that like this is a Boom Studios book and you managed to work Keanu Reeves into the conversation. so right, shout out to Berserker too, which is a very different comic book.
Yes.
This book, this is definitely a book I would recommend to non-comic book readers, right? It highlights the strengths of the format, and I think that that's probably the beautiful thing about this is it's not trying to be anything but what it is, and it's not trying to do anything but tell a competent, beautiful, impassioned story. Like, yeah, I cannot recommend this enough. Like I said, I was very excited that we could do this on the show, because I remember reading this digitally. Actually, I remember reading this as it was coming out, and you know, I got to issue 5 and I was sort of like, no, I need the single issues of this, or I need the hardcover of this actually.
Oh, there's a hardcover?
Yeah, I think there's a hardcover, which I need to actually, which reminded me when I was going back through this, like I need to buy the hardcover. So yeah, like I just, this is one of those books that I don't think it swept the Eisners. You know, I know it's nominated for something along those lines, but this is one of those books that like I really can't think of a more impressive story from the past year than this. So highly recommended.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of, we all need like a little bit more experience in learning how to look from things from other perspectives
Yes.
and how other people feel about things. It's just something that I think the world would be a better place if we all did. And I think that this book is definitely one that it's like, yeah, this kind of helps you to understand like how people feel, and especially about, you know, life and death. It's such a poignant book. And like you said, Troy, I think this is a great one that it's like people who, you know, poo-poo comics. I'm kind of like, no, read this. This will change your perspective on comics because you realize that it's like you can approach a very heavy, deep like subject matter, but in a way that's, you know, easily digestible for everyone. And I think, yeah, this really showcases the power of comics, I think.
Yeah. I mean, actually, you know what? Actually, to your point, yes, it is a very empathetic story. Like it teaches you empathy in a lot of ways, which I think is also the beauty of it. And also, you know, culturally, it's kind of giving you I want to say, an Eastern philosophy on a lot of things. Like, you know, so it's really a cultural conversation, a cultural education, in addition to this story that I think everybody can relate to, you know, on some way, shape, or form, that you'll come away from it like feeling something about mortality, life, death, something in that vein. So it's like very specific, but also it has a wide breadth, you know.
Very true. And now, deluxe edition, yeah.
Deluxe edition,
I always love deluxe edition. So now that we've talked about how like absolutely unique this book is and special, what are your suggested readings?
What compares?
Yeah.
I'll go first because as I was reading this, there was another book I read years ago from Vertigo called Day Tripper, by Gabriel Ba and Fabio Moon, and it is also about death, and it has a ethereal quality to it, very much like this book does. It's very similar in tone, and I would highly recommend that because just like this book, as I was reading it, I was feeling something, but by the time I got to the end of it, I was like, wow, I feel like I just learned something new. Like, you know, and again, culturally, because I think Moon and Ba are both Brazilian, but also in terms of just the larger picture. I would say these books both are really great bookends for each other. So Day Tripper by Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba for sure. And Johnny saying Johnny in the background is going, Death, the High Cost of Living from Vertigo, which was in 93, which is Neil Gaiman and Chris Bacalo, if I remember correctly. So you really can't go wrong with that one.
And what about you, Ashton? What do you recommend?
So funny you would bring up Neil Gaiman because I was going to, I'd recommend Sandman across the board, but specifically Sandman issue number 8 is the issue Sound of Her Wings, where you get to meet Death, Dream's sister. And the way that it's written and set up, it actually functions pretty nicely as a standalone issue. You don't need to really have too much knowledge of what happens prior to it to get something out of this issue. And I think it approaches death also from an empathetic perspective of, you know, it being a kind experience, and Death herself in Sandman is very kind. So I think that's a nice companion piece as well.
Yeah. And actually, yeah, Death, the High Cost of Living was made because Death was such a popular character in that issue 8. So there you go.
There we go. And yeah, I'm going to be the lame person and said this was the first time that I have actually read like a comic that was, you know, so deep and rich. And I mean, this has made me want to look for more because I don't know, this had me feeling ways at the end of it. I was feeling some sort of way, and I hadn't like had a comic that impacted me, I guess, as much like oh god, what is the word? Like psychologically, philosophically,
right?
Both.
Right. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
All right.
Yeah, it was great. So, yeah, totally recommend. This is my reminder for everyone to pick up The Many Deaths of LAILA STARR at your friendly local comic shop. And to find a comic shop near you, simply head on over to comicshoplocator.com. Now, before we head out of here, is there anything that y'all would like to plug? Ashton,
Me.
start with you.
Well, 99 days till Free Comic Book Day. So I know that's very specific, but Free Comic Book Day, Saturday, May 4th at your local comic shop. Also Star Wars Day, so I'm sure it'll be extra double awesome. If you go over to freecomicbookday.com, you can look at the full list of comics. We're starting to get into some preview pages if you want to look through the books and get an idea and get all excited and tingly. And then you can come yell at me on social media at Free Comic Book Day, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok.
Oh, I love it. Star Wars Day and like Free Comic Book Day. That's like so huge.
Right.
If there aren't like at least like 100 costume contests and various like comic book shops, I will be sorely disappointed. And what about you, Troy? What do you got coming up?
Actually, you know what? I'm going to mention 2 other things that I think people should check out. There is a pen and ink version of LAILA STARR, or LAILA STARR. We can argue about how you're supposed to pronounce that. But there's a pen and ink version which basically showcases Felipe Andrade's artwork that I would say definitely check out. I actually ordered that about a few weeks ago because I saw that it was out, and I was like, this is great. I want to have this because I want to see the artwork in real, like, as it was originally presented. Also, Andrade and Ram V have a new book out called Rare Flavors. I think it might have just wrapped up, but it is also from Boom Studios, so definitely check that out. As for my own shout outs, you can hang out with me at TJA Comics, on pretty much all social media platforms that aren't geared towards people under the age of 18. And
what you trying to say?
Which is basically TikTok. And Rexco, my comic imprint. Yeah, Rexco-comics.com. We got some cool stuff over there. I just did a Wu-Tang comic that just I wrote a Wu-Tang comic that just went through the Kickstarter grind. It has been successfully funded. I am one of the stories in the book. So definitely keep an eye out for Rexco-Comics, because the plan is to bring, if you didn't catch the Kickstarter, the plan is to have the graphic novel available on our website, but also it'll be available in bookstores and whatnot, I think later in the year. I think they said November or something like that. But also, I got some really cool stuff coming down the line that I won't necessarily give away just yet, but definitely keep an eye on Rexco-Comics.com.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. For me, let's see, I will be a guest this weekend at Anime Washington, which is really fun. Plus, I don't have to drive too far to get to it, which is kind of nice. And then other than that, you can catch me on all my social media under Animia. Pretty easy to find everywhere. And then I think my Red Sonja that went through the Indiegogo last year should be coming out either this next month or like maybe February. So hopefully that comes out soon. I'm really excited. And I guess we'll close this up with, if you have a graphic novel that you'd like us to talk about, leave a comment below and your choice could be picked for a future episode. This is also your reminder to follow Previews World and Free Comic Book Day on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Finally, heroes are a dime a dozen, but comic fans are priceless. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Do you have a suggestion for a graphic novel that you'd like to see discussed on the panel? Leave us a comment and your choice could be picked for a future episode.